What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have an album review for you. Big surprise. And this one I wanted to go over just because I was initially confused when it was announced, and I'll get into that. But this was one that was heavily requested in the comments, and yeah, once I heard one track, yeah, it was on. So we're going to go over the debut album from Retromorphosis, Psalmus Mortis. This also comes out on the 21st of February on Season of Mist Records. This band formed in 2020 in Sweden. This, again, is their debut album, but the thing that I got confused about was when this band was announced, I thought that this was a reformation of the band Spawn of Possession, which I was a big fan of back when they were around. All three of their albums absolutely whooped ass. I would say that they were one of those spiritual successors to necrophagist, them along with Obscura, of course. But I thought this was going to be a Spawn of Possession, reunion, and, I kept looking around and like, why does it still say that they're broken up on the archives? I am confused, and apparently I just didn't read it right. This is a new band, though if you are a Spawn of Possession fan, it's going to sound really, really familiar.
I mean, that's kind of where I sit with this band. I'd never heard of this band until a couple days ago, and then looking over it, I got into the archives and read a little bit, and I was like, wait a minute. What happened to, okay, all right, okay. And so I just got into it.
So, needless to say, this is tech death, and of course features current and ex-members of, Spawn of Possession. Also, Obscura, Visceral Bleeding, Decrepit Birth, and Deeds of Flesh. And pretty much it's most of the Incurso lineup, which was the last album that Spawn of Possession put out. But we also have some extra members that aren't Swedish. On lead guitars, we have Christian Munzer, formerly of Obscura, and someone that kind of let the cat out of the bag about the last Obscura album, which we'll probably glance over that again because this was definitely more along the lines of what I wanted from an Obscura album.
100%.
Than what I got with an Obscura album that just came out. And this also features Casey Howard on drums. He drummed for Decrepit Birth for a little bit, and he's also the drummer of Odious Mortem, which is an awesome tech death band in itself.
Yes.
And man, the sum of the parts do kind of equal the whole here. This does feel almost like a continuation from Incurso. It is blazing fast. It is technical as hell. It is tight. My God, the playing on here is ridiculous.
Yeah, everyone here knows how to play their instruments. That was never in question anyway, but I swear to God, this is the most syncopated thing on the face of the planet, and done so just, man, the techie moments on here are just insane. I mean, this is kind of, what I want out of a tech death album. Being that I was such a big necrophagist fan, in fact, still am, such a big Obscura fan, and then a giant fan of Spawn of Possession, I mean, this is all of what I wanted.
This is definitely the tech death that I gravitate more towards. And, in terms of like the Obscura comparison, I've always thought that Obscura definitely embraced more progressive leanings. Mm-hmm. Like, they're definitely still tech death, even the new one, I guess. But for the most part, I would say that they, kind of blended progressive metal and tech death. Spawn of Possession, and by extension, I would say this band, feels more just straight up tech death. The riffs are intricate. There's lots of crazy lead work. The drumming is absolutely nuts. You get, wild transitions and, lots of like just interesting songwriting dynamics all across this. But it doesn't come across as like more progressive. This just sounds like a really, really, really good tech death band. Songs like Aunt Christie's Will, which apparently she left a lot of riffs in the will.
Yes, she did.
Man, the fun sliding riffs that start that off. And this one I think is like one of the most rhythmically fun songs on here because Casey kind of just goes through the entire book of like death metal beats.
Yeah.
Like you get the hyper fast blast beats, you get D beats, you get some really awesome grooves in there. And surprisingly, this album has a ton of groove, like lots of fun off-time stuff. His cymbal work is fantastic on here.
And really that happens all across the record. The song Exalted Splendor also, I thought, had some really cool off-time drum patterns in it. And these really like odd off-time gallops. I don't know if you heard those. It's a straightforward gallop, but the riff behind it comes in a beat later, and it gives it this really cool off-time groove, even though it's still on time.
There's a lot of fun rhythmic stuff in here, and syncopation is key, and the syncopation across the board is fun. Like, of course, you have all the crazy riffs and the wild drums, but the vocals on here also a lot of fun cadences and syncopation with the riff work, the drum beats. And I was a big fan of this vocalist work in Spawn of Possession. I was also blown away that he was the drummer on the first 2 albums, too.
Which is stupid.
Just ridiculous.
There's no way.
I didn't see a listed live drummer, so that makes it even more mind-blowing, especially if they did play live, which I would assume they probably did. But this guy finds a lot of fun measures on here, like the double time grooves and the rapid fire cadences on the tree. Kind of close to Archspire, though not quite as fast. Very few people are as fast as Ollie. But his delivery is very similar to Dallas Toller Wade.
So in that case, think Dallas Toller Wade fronting Archspire. That's actually probably closer to what you'd get here.
I buy that album.
I would too.
And while I would make a lot of comparisons to, like, of course, Necrophagist, I would also say Anata, Gorod. There's also stuff that's very similar to Nile and even Decapitated, because this band still gets down and dirty on some riffs. It's not always super complex. You have just solid riffy moments where they hang on to grooves a little bit longer and kind of let the leads take a walk because, I mean, it's Christian Munzer. And just kind of let the riffs kind of hang out for a little bit.
Yeah.
I also like the fact that this has a darker tone to it. It's not as, like, super melodic as I find, like, Obscura. It doesn't quite have, again, that, like, proggy vibe, and it's not a lot of neoclassical stuff. I'm not saying it's not on here, because it 100% is. But even the leads kind of have, like, a darker, more sinister tone, and there are some flat-out just brutal heavy riffs on here. The twisting dark track, Never to Awake, the eponymous track, Retromorphosis, and the 9-minute beast, Machine. Lots of brutal, heavy, dark riffs, and there's a lot of sinister tremolos on here. This definitely has, like, a darker tinge to it than I would say, again, like Obscura. And that is generally accented even more by a lot of synths on here, which the synths kind of hit or miss. I'll get into that a bit more, but occasionally on here, they really do kind of meld with the melodies in here, and you get these, like, lush, evil harmonies.
I think the riffs in Machine in particular are probably some of the most brutal riffs that are on this record, because they're not moving 1,000 miles an hour. Like, they get down to some straight sick-ass halftime speed grooves on Machine, and they're gnarly as hell.
And a 9-minute song, too. Like, you know, Tech Death, generally, for the most part, I find it's better in small doses, but in terms of, like, their approach to Tech Death, it really works here. That's because with this band, and specifically this song, it's more about, like, showing off in terms of songwriting rather than just, like, techniques and playing abilities. We know you have to be good to play in a Tech Death band. You can't suck. You're going to stick out like a sore thumb. Actually, you probably won't make the band. They're just going to tell you to fuck off.
I can play Mary Had a Little Lamb. Okay.
Cool, play it in the fucking parking lot. Often a complaint with, like, Tech Death with me is sometimes it just gets too noodly, it's too much wankery. This song in particular, broken up in really cool movements. It opens up with machine noise because it's called Machine. It's kind of a nondescript machine. I don't know what it does other than making noise.
Yeah.
And then with the keyboards coming in, it kind of sounds like Lurch plays the band in, and then all of a sudden you're into these heavy syncopated grooves.
Yeah.
And again, it has this more sinister vibe, but there's a lot of fun transitions throughout the song. And that kind of keeps the song a little bit more lively. Like, it doesn't sound like the same blitz of riffs and blast beats the entire song. There's a lot of, like, individual moments that really stand out.
Yeah, this song in particular, it's kind of one of those around every corner is something awesome, and this one, because it moves in movements, like, every time they change to another riff, you're like, well, that's fucking sweet. And it happens a lot in that song, most particularly. Another thing that kind of gets me sometimes about Tech Death is that you get a lot of wankery and a lot of, like, noodling, and in this case, like, everything is so pinpoint precise and well thought out that even though it's insane, it doesn't come across as noodly. Like I was telling Nick on the way over here, I jammed Beneath the Massacre in the car. And while that's pretty heavy, that's also really noodly when you get down to it. And there's not a lot of that going on here.
That band knew how to write entire albums that just consisted of blast beats and tapping.
Yep.
I mean, it's pretty fucking remarkable when you break it down, but sometimes like, okay, do something else. But this band does a lot of that. And I like the fact that it is kind of mixed up, like the eponymous track Retromorphosis. Big thrashy vibe to it. There's some great like galloping, fun, chuggy riffs on there. And honestly, at that point, it kind of did sound a little bit more like Narcotic Wasteland because the Dallas Toller Wade kind of ish vocals on there. I don't know. It kind of, gave it like a little bit more of an individual character. Like there's some thrashy riffs that pop up, but that one seemed really geared towards being just fast and aggressive and just, again, flat out thrashy.
And then there's songs like The Tree, which are still insane, but oddly catchy because they're played in a kind of like a whimsical way. I don't want to say cartoony because that's not the case, but you feel very like dreamy almost when half of these riffs hit. And they stick around long enough to let you kind of ease yourself into that vibe and sit there for a minute.
That song does a great job of like swinging in and out of like brutal sections, and then it's neoclassical. It definitely does have notes of that, but it almost kind of feels like, I don't know, like a Danny Elfman score, except, tech death. That's about the only difference. Like, there's this, kind of, again, like whimsical darkness to it. Like, who knows? Maybe that song's about the tree that ate the fucking kid in Poltergeist. Maybe. We're not ruling it out. Honestly, I think Never to Awake is almost like a tech death score to, like, sleep paralysis. There's some lyrical schemes in there about, like, not being able to wake up and being stuck in a dream state, and again, it has these really interesting transitions and, again, this dark, kind of sinister atmosphere. There's a lot of just, like, creativity in terms of the songwriting here. And, again, like, it becomes more about the songwriting than just showing off in terms of what you can do on your individual instrument. And I gotta say, the mix on here, pretty solid. Honestly, it's kind of what you'd expect for tech death. It's very crisp, a lot of compression on it, especially on the guitars. Maybe too much, but you can hear everything, and I think that's very important in tech death because I want to hear 100%. All the individual instrumentation. Like the bass work on here is fantastic too. The drum work, Casey absolutely owns on this.
Yeah.
In terms of any negatives on here, honestly, it probably comes down to one thing, and it would be the synths. Sometimes they really work well. Exalted Splendor, I thought they really built into those harmonies well, and it kind of gave it, like, again, a more gothic, evil tinge. But sometimes when they're a little bit more isolated, they do sound a bit cheesy. And I don't know, like, they felt extra. Plus, we went back and listened to Incurso after this. And, yeah, there are some synths on there, but they're used way more sparingly. And I feel like the synths on here, again, they kind of fit. They did give it kind of a darker tinge, but were they needed? Maybe not. Maybe in the intro. Like the opening track, Obscure Exordium, it's more of like an instrumental lead-in. Like, actually, it's an intro that I won't turn off because it's actually a song. But maybe they're like, all right, let's build up the hype, build up the atmosphere. Let's let people know that this is going to be like a more darker tinged tech death album. But after that, just kind of throw the synthesizer out the window because we don't need it.
I feel the same way. I am not a fan of keys or synths in death metal really anyway, unless they are used for atmosphere and not so much tone. Like, I don't want to hear musical tone coming out of synths so much as I want to hear, like, wind or creepy noises in the background or something. That's typically what I like them for.
I like the horror synths. The horror synths
they're cool too, but those are really cool in an intro. Don't throw it over the top of a song. And I feel like a lot of the synth work in here was kind of thrown over as an additional melody. And, I know that this band is good enough to do whatever the hell they want on their instruments because they can. So shouldn't you, by proxy, be able to make atmosphere out of your instruments instead of putting synth work out? I don't know. That may be just me, but that would be my gripe as well. Outside of that, Minor complaint, honestly. It's really tough to complain about this record. Overall, I'm going to give it 4 stars. Usually, something I say about Tech Death 2 is that the songs can tend to run into each other. And that, if you don't pay attention to this record, that's the case. But when you really get down and pay attention to it, each of these songs is incredibly unique and brings something really cool to the table. Sinister parts, evil parts, downright catchy, downright groovy. And it's done again with such pinpoint precision that it really gives your brain a lot of ooh moments. And that's what's in this record. This, in a nutshell, does pretty much everything I want technical death metal to do, and does it incredibly well, because once again, we are packed with talented musicianship here. So yeah, if you're into bands like Necrophagist, Nile, Obscura, Spawn of Possession, things of that nature, Decapitated, you know, the whole shebang. If you're into bands like that, you're definitely going to be into this band, especially if you were a Spawn of Possession fan. This just scratches all the right itches. So yeah, 4 stars for me. Pretty kick-ass record.
You're kind of digging at the undercarriage there in your metaphor.
Whatever. Scratches my undercarriage. Right there. This record scratched my undercarriage and I was happy.
It was consensual. I'm also at a 4 here. Honestly, this is almost like kind of like a missing piece in terms of Spawn of Possession's very short discography. Mm-hmm. Lots of killer riffs. Technical, it's impressive as hell. I mean, of course, like with Tech Death, you should be impressed by the musicianship. Otherwise, I feel like they're doing it wrong. But this is impressive on a songwriting standpoint, too. The songs do stand out, and when given the chance to kind of like, you know, fiddle around and have some fun with them, they're engaging, but they never lose like their just brutal fury and just all the fun stuff you expect. Machine is probably a huge standout for me, but I mean, Never to Awake, The Tree, the eponymous track, the whole album honestly is awesome. Like, I couldn't even bitch about the intro because it was a solid musical lead-in. And I like the fact that it wasn't always super complex. They do like to settle down on riffs, and riffs generally win me over. The only thing that I wasn't on board with were the synths, which, you know, sometimes they worked. Other times I'd just rather not hear them because, you know, I don't think they added as much as maybe they thought they did in the studio. There's enough, like, just crazy musicianship on here to dazzle you, but again, I think this comes down to the songwriting, and yeah, this sounds like a lot of killer bands that I already like. Like, of course, it sounds like Spawn of Possession. If it didn't, I would be a little fucking shocked. But of course, you know, Necrophagist, Anata, Gorod, and again, like Nile and Decapitated in there too. Yeah, this is an absolute blast. If you're a big fan of any of those bands, strongly recommend checking this out. This is just absolutely killer tech death. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They're only 99 cents, and we do a members-only live stream as our lone perk, which we will probably do one either later this month or early next month, and who knows what we'll talk about in that. It'll probably be something weird. It always devolves into something strange, but we're down for that because, yeah, we're just total dorks. But memberships are the main way to support the channel now. We also still have our store, thrallsmetal.com, with our t-shirts and hats. That is linked down below in the video description. And of course, if you would like to join this channel, there is a button down here, and you could be a proud thralling, or I don't know what you guys are.
Yeah, we haven't figured that out yet. I think Thraller would be the most appropriate, but I don't know. Knowing us, we'll come up with something. It'll be probably stupid.
Thrallicus memberus.
That's pretty solid, actually.
That's the Latin.
That's pretty solid. I like it. Anyway, we just want to thank you guys for being here. I know we do it every time, but it means the absolute world to us. We thank you guys for watching our content and appearing in discussions. It means the world to us. Tons of content coming your way. Album reviews, discography rankings. We have At the Gates coming up next, which is going to be pretty sweet. Tons of segments, forums, states of metal, is it not metal, band versus band, album versus album, stuff like that. Nick's never-ending collection updates, just stuff all the time. And we do it for you guys because we appreciate you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, you guys absolutely rule. Tons of content coming your way. So one more big thank you because you guys are awesome.
Thank you.
And we will catch you later.